Hi, welcome. This is Dr. John DeMartini. This is one of the most amazing and inspiring shows that you can listen into. If you want to be on the edge of your seats, if you want to open up your heart, if you want to expand your mind, and you want to meet incredible people, stay tuned because you're just about to experience a transformative radio show that will change your life. And you're listening to the Dr. Pat Show that's coming up right next.
Welcome to the Dr. Pat Show. Talk radio to thrive by. Powerful, inspiring, and coming to you live, bringing you stories of people like you and me, busting through and living life full out. Get ready to dare to wonder what your life would be like if you knew you could not fail. Hey, everybody. Welcome to our good news segment. Look, I want to just tell everybody, what do I mean by a good news segment? It has been such an honor and a privilege to do this with Ted and, and to get you information. But this thing right here today, this conversation today, you're going to find that what you're getting is you're going to get some information that perhaps you didn't think about. And what do I mean by that? Peak hurricane season, how to get prepared. So let me just say peak hurricane season, how to get prepared. What I mean by that, when we talked to Dr. Ian Giammanco and Michael Richmond-Crum here, Director of Personal Lines Counsel at American Property Casualty Insurance Association, and Dr. Ian about lead researcher, meteorologist at the Insurance Institute. So here's what the conversation is about. Our world is changing. Our climate is changing. But even if it wasn't changing, and you go back to when my mom lived in Homestead, Florida, and Hurricane Andrew came in. The good news is my brother was smart enough to have one of the very few homes that was built out of cinder block. But that's just one part of it. Today, these two amazing gentlemen are going to take us on a journey about what does it mean to be prepared? What does it mean for you to check in terms of your insurance? I mean, when was the last time you even looked at something like that, folks? Thank you, both of you, for joining me here today. Great to have you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Pat, for having us.
Look, I want to get out of the gate. I want to talk about this because insurance is enormous. I mean, it is an insurance conversation, but it's not. It's also about a preparedness conversation. It's about what can you do? What should you know? Now, a lot of times we live in a world where we take an action and then we don't look at it for 30 years. We just put the paper, we just take it like, I got it, put it over here. And I just recently had to do that with my own. But I want to ask each of you this question. In the world that you live in, I want to know what you discovered that people don't know. What are your at the top of your list? Each of you, I'm going to put you a little bit on the high. I'm going to go to you, Dr. Ian. I'm going to go to you first. So that gives Mike a little bit more time. But, in your studies and what you're bringing here to the table, what's on the top of the list, or you wouldn't be doing this, Dr. Ian, right?
Yeah, that's a really good one. And a lot of people don't realize that there is things you can do to your home and your preparedness that's going to help it survive whatever the severe weather event is. Actually, we can span the entire gamut from hurricanes to tornadoes to severe thunderstorms to wildfires, that there are elements that you can do to a home, and many of which are affordable. There are some bigger things, there's some smaller things, but each individual one, when you couple them all together, really can make a big difference. And I think a lot of people don't realize that today.
Yeah. How about you, Michael? Michael, welcome. Good to have you. Good to have you both.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, I would say that my one lesson that I've learned recently is, how important the house is in the long-term financial and economic well-being of a family. It really is sort of the main depository of wealth, intergenerational wealth in particularly. And so it's important to make sure that it's protected and, the financial asset of it is really protected in the long term.
I want to talk about APCIA for a minute. That's an acronym. It's American Property Casualty Insurance Association. It's an association. And whenever we talk about an association, I always have this sense, and Dr. Ian, I'm going to come back to you on this, but I always have this sense that you're on the forefront of what the trends are, what the changes are, what people may need, what they don't know. And can I hit you up with this, Michael? I want to know from your perspective and where you sit. You're an expert in this field. That's a big thing to me. And I want to know what you've seen in the past. I'm going to give you a break. Past 5 years. where you said, oh, wait a minute?
That's a great question. And I think there have been a lot of things. I mean, really, and you touched on it earlier, we're seeing a lot of weather change. We're seeing a lot more named storms. Fortunately, this year has been relatively light. I think Dr. Ian can probably speak better to that. But it's surprising how big and impactful the recent storms have been. We've seen a really rising trend in billion-dollar storms over the last 8 to 10 years, and it's not looking to slow down anytime soon. What Hurricane Harvey did to Houston is just devastating. But additionally, we're seeing warming trends out west. We're seeing wildfires year round now. Things really are changing, and I think people need to be more in tune with that the landscape has changed, and that we need to start preparing and looking at things differently.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. And yet, we are aware of the change, but we're not aware. I'm going to kick this back, Dr. Ian. We're not aware that even though we're seeing the changes and we're a little bit more consciously aware, we're not making any changes on our own. We're not looking at what we have. We're not saying, oh, wait a minute. I wonder if I'm going to be covered in this. I'm wondering if this ... Dr. Ian, from where you sit too, I mean, these changes, I wish I could say, I live in the Pacific Northwest, and I think it rained once in 30 days, kind of unheard of here. The good news for us is the temperature drops to 50 degrees at night. But my friends on the East Coast, I mean, they're thinking, what the heck is going on? What is your take on how these trends should make people more aware that as a homeowner, they need to make sure they're checking like the small print, the boxes, and asking questions? I'm going to kick that back to you in a minute, Michael. But how about you, Dr. Ian?
Yeah, so I mean, what you're seeing is these events just basically kicking the front door in, and it's right in our faces now. That I think it's the growing number of Americans. This is not a question anymore. We know it's going on. Now, the next step, as you mentioned, Pat, is to work to figure out what are the first steps we got to take to adapt to our changing climate. So, we'll look at the stagnant weather patterns that we face. We know the climate ties very well to the heat waves, the extreme precipitation, those kinds of things. We're still learning as it pertains to the smaller things like severe thunderstorms. Hurricanes sit right there in the middle. But we have got to start taking those first steps to adapt to our changing climate. And I, as humans, it's hard for us to think about those long-term timescales. But, the weather has basically, punched us right in the gut, right? Yeah. And you think about even going all the way back to Hurricane Andrew, oftentimes we don't even rebuild with that in mind. We don't rebuild with those hazards. I will say Andrew, though, did spur a positive from the building code perspective in Florida. Florida actually leads the nation in the strength of its building code. And that's a direct result from Hurricane Andrew 30 years ago. Unfortunately, it takes these events, giving us the gut punch in those couple years after, to take some good steps where we all want to work together, right? We're not going to split into our tribes and start yelling at each other. We have that window of time where we can take advantage of that. And that's, I think we're there, and we have got to start looking at that also in the long term as the first steps to adapt to our changing climate.
Yeah, I love that we're talking about like what at a global level, at a state level, as institutional level, what people need to do, because they have to work closely to do that. And I think we're gonna get to talk a little bit more about what to look for in insurance. But I want to stay with you, Dr. Ian, for a minute, because there are some things people should be looking at doing now. I mean, there are clearly some things, like not rocket science things, but what would you say are the top 3 things people should do to be prepared for whatever? I'm going to say whatever.
Okay, so let's start with just, we'll go severe weather as a whole. So first, damage often starts at your roof. So things you can do to basically make sure your roof is good and strong. There's a couple things you can do when you're re-roofing, and we can go into some of that. You can actually investigate those things on your own, but start with your roof, making sure your roof is in good condition. Now, if you come inside the home, an easy thing that all of us should do all the time, keep your home inventory of all your stuff. And Michael can actually expand upon kind of the details of this, but take photographs, take videos of all your things, whether they're keepsakes, highly valuable items, things like sports memorabilia, but your TV, your computer, your laptop, all that stuff, have it handy in case the bad happens. So roof to inside, and then you start looking around your home about what are some of those little things you can do, picking up things that become flying debris, sealing up doors and windows, managing just how you operate your generator and your supplies, your emergency kits. if you start one, chances are human behavior starts to kick in and you want to do more and more and more. And then you eventually get to some of those really big projects. Like when it comes time to re-roof, say, okay, I'm going to take this step. I'm going to add better nails. I'm going to seal my roof deck. I'm going to do some of those details that do make a difference. And we let human behavior kick in. So there are things you can do from a severe weather perspective. It often starts with what's above us. It's our roof. That's what protects us, keeps water out of our home, gives us shelter.
Yeah, I mean, this is really, Michael, let's go over to you. This is like a change in perspective and mindset. You know, once upon a time, you didn't have to think about it. And now, you know, I was just talking to a friend of mine on the East Coast where I think they got rain the other day and they hadn't had rain. And for the first time, they're watching their sewers back up. They're like, why isn't the rain soaking into the dirt? I mean, there's so many different conditions, but still, it doesn't matter. The things we're talking about today, people should put right on their checklist and say, I need to look into this. Michael, how about you? What's on your top 3?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You want to check those boxes and you want to take a look at it. I think number one, you want to get that insurance policy out. These days, a lot of people have it on their computer, which is a great place for it. You want it someplace that's going to be safe in the cloud. But, maybe you've got it in the back of that file drawer somewhere, collecting dust. Take it out, take a look. I think second after that, you want to, call up your agent if you've got one and, sit down and have a conversation with them about the coverage and make sure you've got the coverage you think you do. I mean, we've seen a lot of inflationary pressure in the country over the last couple of years. Housing markets have increased, reconstruction prices have increased. You want to make sure that with those changes, your policy's up to date and got you covered. And, the third thing is get in touch with your insurance company. Make sure that same questions for them. Make sure you've got open lines of communication and that you have the ability to communicate with them easily when the worst happens, if it happens.
I'm sitting here talking to you guys and like on my computer, I got a little pop-up where I live, right? Pacific Northwest. And and I told you, it's 67 degrees and we're talking about hurricanes. Mostly people relate this to the East Coast, but we're talking also about weather. We're talking about being prepared. We're talking about doing some things that make sense. So we're sitting here talking about this and I get a pop-up for today, record high. Really? Is that going to be higher than the 105 we had? See, this is the new world we're living in. And yet people have not looked at their insurance policies. I'm going to make a blanket statement. Please correct me if I'm wrong. You buy your home, you get your insurance, you file your paperwork, and you're done for 20 years. And I think what we're talking about is we can't do that anymore. You have to stay on top of the trends that are happening, the changes that are happening. And don't you find, Michael, that, calling an insurance company, they can help people understand what they need to do to be better prepared, right? Or no?
Yeah, absolutely. Insurance companies and insurance agencies really should be resources to help you figure out those questions you haven't thought to ask yourself. What are you going to really need after a catastrophe? One of the options, policies make available are things like additional living expenses. That's that cash in your hand immediately after the disaster that helped you sort of bridge that gap. You need a roof over your head, you need food, you need the opportunity to get clothing, toothbrushes, toothpaste, those little things. And so that's a question a lot of people don't think to ask themselves, but it would be really helpful to know because you can put that in that policy, and that way if the worst happens, it's there for you.
So let's talk about this because this is a burning question and I know it's the elephant in the room. So I'm just going to get out there, Dr. Ian, and then Michael with you let's talk low cost ways. Let's talk low cost, because the minute we have a conversation like this, people turn completely off and they don't think there's low cost. Now, look, I've done enough work and volunteer work that I tell people, this is your checklist of what you have to have in your house. Find a closet, put water in it. These are things that you can do. Every time you go to the store, get yourself a little something, put it in there. But let's talk, Dr. Ian, from your perspective, low cost things, even so far as be aware of the hotels in your area, be aware, right, of the hotels that have brick walls, right? What are you thinking, Dr. Ian?
So Pat, that's an incredible example. It's just simple awareness. That doesn't cost us a dime. And all of us have our cell phones handy. We can do a lot with them. And that goes into making our plan for our home and our family. I mentioned the home inventory, but that's have your plan. Do you need to evacuate? Do you live in a flood zone? Is storm surge going to get you? In a tornado environment, where is the safest place in your home? I know mine, it's down in my basement under the stairs in the closet. And I make sure I clean it out so I can get myself, my daughter, my wife, our dogs in there in the event I need to run down there in about 30 seconds. That's a tornado kind of case. Those are free. There's nothing that you got to pay for. It's just simply you decide, takes a little responsibility, a little action yourself, have some fun with your family, make your kit, make your plan. And then when you have to hit go, you've done it. You got that little bit of muscle memory like we talk about with athletes. It's the same thing, y'all. And you can put that into place. Now, when you start to look at your home itself, there are little things. We mentioned the home inventory, but sealing up those windows and door frames where there's, I mean, you're $10 of a silicone tube. The home inventory, again, that's free. You could look at cleaning up, the sweat equity about moving those things that could become flying debris. Just even if you can't, I had a friend, severe weather was in the forecast. He couldn't get all his outdoor furniture inside. So he shoved it up against the wall and ratchet strapped it to a column. I was like, well, that's a novel way to do it. And if you lowered the chance that stuff would start bouncing around, you did something. And that's what we want folks to know is some of those you're just trying to whittle off that chance and give yourself and your home fight back against the weather, right?
Yeah. Yeah, living on the East Coast, I became a duct tape expert. That's what I became. Like duct tape was my friend. I'm not kidding. I mean, but one of the things you said, I want to go to you, Michael, for a minute, because this is really a conversation about what you should do before. Thank you for those tips. The other thing is, I want to say this to everybody. You can buy a very small, it's the size of a cell phone, and it's almost like a battery pack. It's a charger pack. It's very compact. And you charge that up. And that's available for you to have to charge up your cell phone. Why is that important? We are living in the world now. Like if you're stuck, you don't want to say my battery on my cell phone is low and I don't have any place to plug it in. So for me, you can go online and get one of these very small battery packs, and those things are worth their weight in gold. Now, Michael, for you, I think there's a number one mistake that people make. And how do I know this? Because I'm reflecting on my own family a little bit. We call the insurance company after the hurricane, but that may not be the best solution, is it?
No, you really want to make sure that you get in touch with them in advance. You want to take a look at your policy and make sure that you kind of got those coverage conditions that are really going to help you, especially in these changing times. We've seen a lot of inflation, as I mentioned earlier, but there are certain policy features that you can take into consideration. Like there are automatic inflation guards for policies. You can also have extended replacement cost coverage, which in major disasters, when a lot of houses are damaged or destroyed, that the cost of rebuilding goes up because of limited supply for things like 2x4s and labor. And so having that little extra cushion really helps. Also, building code and ordinance coverage, good to consider, because maybe you have to rebuild to a higher building code because you've got grandfathered in, and you want to take those things into consideration. You really want to sit down at the kitchen table and do that cost benefit analysis when you're working out your policy.
I love it. And, I know that our time is limited here. So I want to make sure from each of you that we're giving people information about how they can find out more. Michael, from your perspective, what's the best place to go?
Well, I always recommend that if you're looking for information about insurance in your state and good places to go, swing by your state Department of Insurance website. They'll be able to tell you who's licensed to write in the state and what the general community information. And I know Dr. Ian's got some really great information for IBHS that is just fantastic for helping people prepare in advance for the realities of natural disasters.
Awesome. Dr. Ian, where should people go?
Yeah, we encourage folks, please go to our website. It's disastersafety.org. We've got what we call our ready guides, and this covers everything from hurricanes, severe storms, and wildfires. So if you just Google IBHS or disaster safety ready guides, you'll find it. We've got those three there. They've got all these little tips, some of the things we talked about today, all the way up to the bigger projects, like when it's time to re-roof or some of those retrofits when you really want to take a big step to make your home really better, stronger for the next storm. Please check those out, disastersafety.org. Great stuff there for everything from the small stuff to the big stuff.
Yeah. And I just want to comment on what both of you actually talked about. I can't emphasize enough how important it is to document what you have in your home. And the reason I say this is now with technology, not only can you create video clips and pictures, you can upload them to a cloud and they're there. If you have prints, like I have prints in my house, that if I just tell my insurance company, oh, I got a print, I had 6 prints, and I don't say, oh, by the way, they're all signed by the artist. There's a very different effect. So I want to encourage people, more is better when it comes to inventories. Michael, wouldn't you agree, Dr. Ian?
Absolutely. You want to do everything you can. And you said it, it's really easy these days with smartphones, photos, videos. It's not hard. Take a little time, do it. It pays dividends down the road.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you guys are great. Look, last question. I'd love to know your personal message, each of you. Michael, what do you want to leave us with? What's your personal message for people today?
Safety first. I've myself have lived through a couple of hurricanes. I spent those nights sleeping on the living room floor with my parents when I was a kid, And the second thing is, hurricanes can turn in a second. You can wake up one morning and everything's normal. And then the next thing you know, it's a disaster situation. So be safe.
And you're absolutely right. And what I tell people too is, if you see water on the floor, do not walk down there. There are a million reasons. We could do a whole show on that. Thank you, Michael. How about you, Dr. Ian? What's your personal message?
Yeah, I want folks just to understand there is a lot of things we can do to be prepared and really reduce the damage from severe weather. Someday these events are going to be like a bump in the road to us. Yeah. Let's start on that path. We know how to do it. There's a lot of science that's come to bear on this. We just need to take that action ourselves and look at that kind of stuff and take that first step. Once you take that first step, often our behavior kicks in and we want to do more. So just know you can.
Can I just say to you too, we didn't talk about this, but I want to put a plug in for weather organizations, because now on your phone, you can tie into a weather organization. You could see exactly where a storm is. You can make the decisions in advance. Do I stay? Do I go? Do I board up? Do I not? I mean, we have technology on our side now. We just have to really talk to people about paying attention and then taking that next step, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Social media, for all the negatives, there's a lot of positives in natural catastrophes. So follow your local office of the National Weather Service, the National Hurricane Center, the Storm Prediction Center. Follow your favorite TV broadcast meteorologist. Have those trusted sources of information. Have multiple ways to get all that information. And it's right there now at our fingertips. So be aware, be prepared, be ready, just be smart for the next storm.
And I want to say, go to disastersafety.org. Did I get that correct? And on behalf of Michael and on behalf of the organization that he also represents, pull out your policy. It's not that scary. Go get it, pull it out, call your insurance agent. You will find that things have changed. There are new things available you may not know about. And, get yourself a solution that's going to work for these changing times. Thank you both so much for joining me here today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you, Pat.
All right, let's take a short break. We'll be right back.